Well, I am very excited to bring you my very special guest today, someone who I've desired to interview for a very long time. We have with us today Annie Lobert, who is the founder and CEO of Hookers for Jesus. She is a survivor of more than a decade of sex trafficking in Hawaii, Minneapolis, as well as Las Vegas. She is known for being one of the first women to openly speak about her experience of being sex trafficked and one of the first to start a nonprofit outreach and safe house to help victims of abuse as a survivor leader. Annie is a wife, speaker, author, entrepreneur. She's a thought leader, advocate for the abused, and it is my honor, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you, none other than Annie Lobert. Welcome to the show, Annie.
Hey, Dr. Bond, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'll tell you one thing. I think your story needs to be a movie.
I do too. I totally agree.
What is sex trafficking?
So sex trafficking is any time someone is coerced into being sold for sex with fraudulent activity, manipulation, lies, and any type of physical force as well. I mean, they could be a combination of just 2 or 3 of them. It doesn't need to have every single ingredient, but it's anytime someone is a slave to someone controlling them and being sold for sex. So we all know the glamorous 70s and the 80s, they would glorify it like pimps. And that pimp is just another word for a sex trafficker.
Well, so it's kind of like the movie Pretty Woman. They kind of glamorized prostitution and made it look okay. And I think that
because she didn't have, I mean, I think her and the other lady had a pimp, and I think they broke away from him or something, and then they got on their own. I can't really remember that part of that story, but yes, they made it look like, oh, I'm going to go to college. This is just fine. But honestly, that movie is very endearing to me. Now, did you know, I believe Disney owns it now?
Really? Well, I'm not even going to go there with that.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
so the movie was really heartwarming for me personally, even though it did glamorize it, because what I saw on that movie was redemption. I saw a beautiful woman getting pulled into this industry and, you know, in this way mishandled by a bunch of different men that was purchasing her, buying her. And then she meets this Romeo guy. I mean, it's just a beautiful romance, even though it starts off as a business transaction. And she ends up falling in love with the guy, which, by the way, this was my hope when I was a call girl in Las Vegas, that I would meet a man that would brush me off my feet, sweep me off my feet, put me on the white horse, put the cape on, and tell me that I was beautiful, that I was loved, that he was going to change my life, we were going to get married and have kids. So yeah, that movie is just a fantasy, because that's normally not what happens. And a lot of people say, well, it's those ladies' choices. I mean, those girls on the street, or those girls that are call girls, or those trannies that are call guys, or whatever it is, or girls, they are choosing that lifestyle and they love it because they love sex. That is not true. That is I want to call it basically not a rumor, but fake news.
Well, yeah. Well, at the same time, too, you know, and I've talked to others. And of course, you and I are going to get very in depth into this. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, I would suggest that some of your kids may want to leave. You may want your kids to leave the room. But I want to bring up the kid situation. I want to bring up teenage girls because, you know, we deal now with heavy social media, and where everybody creates this image online like, hey, you know, life is great, but that's just the pictures that are being shown. A lot of teenage girls don't realize that there can be a lot of damage and danger of posing in bikinis or whatever on Instagram and not realizing that predators are going to seek them out, and they think that everything is glamorous. And then in a way, a lot of men, you know, start buying them things to gain their trust, and then eventually they could be kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking, correct?
Yes, and not so much kidnapping. By the way, teenagers, do not leave the room. I need you to stay here because you need to hear what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I agree.
So as far as social media, It is, and it's, by the way, up to the parents, because don't shelter your kids from what we're about to share. This needs to be a conversation with your kids, with I would say teenagers, older teenagers, because of the fact that when I got into it, I was a teenager. Social media for me, Dr. Bond, was Vogue magazine.
Wow.
It was MTV. It was the National Enquirer, The Sun, right? You remember those magazines?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was my life, and that was the only way to communicate with the outside world. I would watch people and think, wow, she's so beautiful. Look at the clothing. Look at the nice car. Look at that TV commercial. Look at that movie. I want to be just like them. And so today's social media is not only a triple threat, I would say maybe 100 times threat, because of the fact that now we can communicate. We have the internet. We've got all these different sites, and literally there's new sites being made every single day. Fancy sites people can come on and talk to the young kids, the young generation. And of course, we all know about TikTok, Snapchat. There's another one that a lot of people don't really talk about. It's called Live Me. And it's literally where you put your camera and you can pay people with hearts and stars and cash, and you press buttons while you're watching them. And it's a live feed of them just hanging out. Hours and hours of it. And you know who's mostly on that app right now? Young kids, children, and teenagers. It's not necessarily, I have an account on there just so I could see what was going on. It's very, to me, it's an easy way to get lured in and to befriend someone that is a trafficker, that's an undercover trafficker. And I just want to let everyone know out there, you don't know what a trafficker looks like until you meet a trafficker. Traffickers don't look like what people say. They can look like anybody. They could be your next door neighbor. They could be a woman, a man, a grandpa figure, a grandma figure. I'm just keeping it real.
Wow.
Traffickers come in all shapes, cultures, sizes, and forms and colors. Okay?
Well, you know, well, let me ask you this, Annie, because I know that, you know, porn is a huge problem.
Yes.
They're now finding out that kids as young as 8 years old, because you can go online. There's no block for age at all, and anybody can see whatever they want to see. And these kids, I mean, I've heard kids at the age of 11 and 12 being completely addicted and ruining their life. But what they're seeing may be a shock at first because they don't know what sex is at 8, but all of a sudden they become numb and immune, and then it looks like it's okay. It looks like it's natural. But a lot of people don't realize that this behind the scenes of porn shoots, a lot of those girls are sex trafficked. There is sexual abuse there. And a lot of, you know, I'm not going to say a lot of people don't know that, but there was a lot of people that do not know that they think that they're just porn actresses. They're not. That is sex trafficking on camera.
And a lot of the people that are purchasing and watching porn, they think they love what they're doing. Just because they see them do a sexual act does not mean they love what they're doing. I have had friends that have died in the porn industry, been trafficked in the porn industry. It's very abusive. They get a lot of the actors and actresses on drugs, and they coerce them. They underpay them. It's slave labor. Yeah. It's sexual slave labor, AKA trafficking. Well, so when we're watching and consuming, I want everyone to know, and especially teenagers, you're looking at that, you're actually harming not only yourself because your brain's changing anatomically, it's changing. It'll never be the same if you continue to watch porn. Except for the fact of genes, right?
I've read the studies, even with adults, that
it creates new pathways in your brain of addiction, dependence, dopamine. The levels, they spike. And so when your levels spike, when you're watching something that you're addicted to, that you need to get a rise off of, whatever it is, an orgasm, I'm just going to keep it real, an addiction. They need to have that orgasm. So your brain says, oh, I had 3 yesterday. Can I get 4 today? I mean, your brain wants.
Well, it's like an adrenaline rush. You know, you get some guy that may climb a mountain. He goes, "Oh man, that was just so awesome." Now he wants to jump off the side of a cliff with a parachute and go base jumping, and it's always something else. But this type of addiction is even worse than that because it's never ending, And as they strive to see something else, it gets darker and darker and darker. But what I want to get into right now is your story. How could someone like you from Minnesota be trafficked?
Well, I mean, great question. Like a Midwest girl, come on, somebody. How is this even happening? And by the way, I was raised on Minnesota farms, turkey farms. And I was living in actually Minneapolis for about 6 years, exact neighborhood that terrible murder happened to George Floyd. That's my neighborhood, Dr. Bond.
Yeah.
Minneapolis is my heart, okay? I love that place. But growing up there was, you just, it's a very, the culture in Minneapolis and Minnesota is very family orientated from what I remember anyway. And we all went to church. Like, this was what we did. We grew up, but the thing is that my family on the outward appearance looked really, to a lot of people, normal, but my dad was actually abusing my mother and us kids. And he had just quit drinking. I think he quit drinking when I was about 3 years old. So I remember him being drunk, just bits and pieces. It's very foggy, but I know that he was a happy drunk. But when he got sober, that's when all the anger and the abuse really started. Wow. And so my mom would get hit in front of us kids. So this is kind of like a geom. A lot of the people that are vulnerable, that get trafficked, have the same type of geom where there is abuse in the background of the family. There's physical, mental, emotional abuse that actually creates, just like porn, in the brain, a new pathway of survival mode, disassociation, trauma bonding. Yes, I loved my father, but I wanted to please him. I wanted to do anything, like whatever it took to make my dad happy. I was scared to death of my father. So I initially had this need to be loved. And I think all children do. And we need both caregivers to be present. But when your dad is there, but he's not present, that's abandonment. And that causes something called complex trauma. Complex trauma, there's two different ways to look at it. Some people think, oh, it's just trauma. No, it's not. So PTSD, we know trauma is from war veterans, right? It's from a single event, a car accident, someone dies in your family, an earthquake happens, a natural disaster, right? This pandemic is, well, I don't know if I want to consider it PTSD because it's kind of long-term and going on for a long time, so it might not be considered PTSD triggering. However, these one-time events can trigger PTSD and create that. But complex trauma is actually when you are in an event that you can't escape. You can't leave. Like, the perpetrator is lording over you. You're never safe. You always feel endangerment. There's no place to stabilize your feelings of fear. So that's how complex trauma gets formed. And then once it gets formed, you go into survival mode, which is fight, flight, fright, or freeze.
Wow.
And fawning too. And that means fawning was one of the things I did best. Is that's when it's like the Stockholm syndrome, where you actually bond with your trafficker, you bond with your abuser, and you try to please them, and you act like it's not going on, and you just put a smile on, and you do whatever they say, and you act like you're on their side, but you really aren't, because deep down inside you're thinking of a plan to escape.
So how did you end up in this situation, and then how long did it take you to escape that type of life?
So I actually went to high school, graduated. I had a relationship with a boy, gave my virginity to him. My heart got broken by him. So I went out into the world, got my 3 jobs because I wanted to go to college. I love to learn. And I thought, if I have 3 jobs, I can save money. I can get my own place. Well, I tell you what, working 3 jobs, not getting a lot of rest makes a person like me. I was a teenager, very restless. So I started going out to the nightclubs with my girlfriend. We had a fake ID, met some guys. We didn't know it, but guess what, Dr. Bond? They were undercover pimps, undercover traffickers. They told us they were businessmen. My girlfriend meets one of them and takes off to Hawaii. And it's what they call in the game turning out. So he taught her through another pimp friend of his, a trafficker friend of his, one of his bottom girls. A bottom girl is the main girl in a stable. Now, a stable is a family where a trafficker has all these different people working for him as sex slaves.
Wow.
That's what they call, the stable. It's called a stable, literally like a stable of horses. Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But there's a bottom girl, a bottom person, and the bottom girl taught my friend how to sell herself. And then she calls me up, hey, I'm making $1,000 an hour. Now in the 80s, that sounded like a lot of money because double that figure. It's $2,000 in today's economy.
Oh, wow.
$2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an hour my girlfriend was making. And I was like, what are you doing? She's like, don't worry. You don't have to have sex. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? She goes, just get here. So I flew to Hawaii. And the first night that I worked, I got a fake ID, a Hawaiian ID that said Fallon York. That was my working name. In fact, my book right here, hold on, I'm going to grab it. That's the name of my book.
Oh my gosh.
So I used that name as a pseudonym, and I got that name from Dynasty, the TV show. Fallon, right?
Right.
And I turned my first date, it's called Date or Trick, with 2 Japanese men and my girlfriend. It was called a double date, and made a bunch of money, and $500, that was $1,000 back then. Didn't have to have sex, and I was hooked, hook, line, and sinker. No trafficker, no pimp. I would not have one. I was like, I'm going to do this without a pimp. There's no one that's going to take my money. Wow. So yeah, I thought that I could do this without a trafficker.
So how old were you at that time?
I was actually 19. I had just turned 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Still a teenager.
I mean, and that, it's amazing because you literally took the phone call from your friend, hopped on a plane, didn't even really think twice about it, and bam, it starts. And how long, and then, what evolved during that time before you decided to escape?
Oh my gosh. I went back to Minnesota after 2 weeks of vacation in Hawaii, and I quit all 3 of my jobs, started working escort services there, started stripping at the strip club, met a man there. He was a trafficker, fell in love with him, didn't know he was a trafficker, brought him to Vegas with me. And we moved in with my girlfriend and her trafficker. And the first night that I worked in Las Vegas, I got the beat down of my life. I almost died. He hid me for about 2.5 weeks till my bruises healed and my black eyes were normal again and my cuts were healed on my body. And then I, believe it or not, Dr. Bond, can you imagine this? I stayed with this man for 5 years.
Was it just the fear? Was it the fear or the thought of, if you did leave that, you could end up dead?
Yes. The main ingredient to that whole relationship was fear, coercion, and manipulation. Okay. And I loved him.
Wow.
Now, not just that relationship. I left him alone for a couple months, got with another guy that was a dancer in a show on the strip. And he turned in to be my trafficker too. 5 more years. 5 more years. Okay. And of course, the guy has a job. He's a dancer in one of the main shows in Las Vegas. The casino's no longer there, to give someone a clue, but it got imploded. But my whole point is this: how did I know? How did I not know? People say, "Well, come on, Annie, you're pretty smart. Like, don't insult my intelligence. You seem pretty articulate. You're very well together. You think out what you're gonna say, and you seem like you're a really sharp person." It doesn't matter. See, trafficking can hit anywhere, anybody. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. I know women that got with traffickers that were from very wealthy families in Utah, okay, that were rebelling against their parents. Okay, wow. So it can happen to anyone. And yes, the other end of the spectrum is the minority populations. Obviously, I'm white, I'm not minority, but it happens to the white girls and the white boys too. And so I finally did get out of the business in 1998, the first time out of escorting. So I ended up working at a job with this guy that took me out of the business. He was actually one of my clients, and I'm going to call him a buyer, but he was a client, and we fell in love, and I was with him for 7 years. And I got back. It sounds crazy, but I was on drugs right towards the end of working. I never did drugs almost the whole time I was in it. But then at the end, I got hooked on cocaine. I came down with cancer. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you know as well as I do, Dr. Bond, when you don't eat right, when you've got complex trauma going on times 1,000, and you're not taking care of yourself, cancer hit me hard. For 2 years, I lost my hair, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. I'm cured. Thank you, Jesus. 1995 to 97. But what ended up happening is I started working again in the casinos and selling myself. Oh my gosh, I had so much trauma, and my friend and I, we broke up. And even though I was running his business, I got back into escorting because I got hooked on painkillers.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was taking about 260 milligrams of OxyContin a day. So it's a long story. People are just going to have to get the book, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me ask you this, because, and if I'm trying to remember this correctly, when you escaped, weren't you locked in the trunk of a car?
That was one of the times I escaped.
One of the times you escaped.
Yeah. Like I said, people have to read the book because it reads like a movie. I literally, that night, I was with the first trafficker, and he had cut all my, it was right after I had left him, and he kidnapped me, cut all my hair off, and beat me down with 6 other traffickers, a bunch of girls that were with the traffickers watching me. I actually went back to him after that. It sounds crazy and insane. But when I was back with him, he went out of town, and he came back, and he had heard that I was going to leave him. So he decided to get the shovel and the body bag and the gloves, and he started the car, and he took his gun and put it to my head and said, "Get in the trunk." And the car was running with the garage door shut, and he tied me up and gagged me. And I somehow got the gag out of my mouth, and I started singing, "Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me, this I know." And he heard me, and he popped the trunk. And I literally, Dr. Bond, I thought I was going to die that night.
Yeah.
He literally said, "B," you guys can fill in the blank because we're a clean show, right?
Right.
"You're crazy. Get out." And he untied me and let me go. And as soon as he left the house, I packed my bags and took off. So this was such a hard relationship. I went back to him several times before I actually left. This is what happens to a lot of people that get in trafficking, and when they're in love with their abusers. The stats say, from Melissa Farley's website, prostitutionresearch.com, says that girls go back 5 to 7 times. And I would honestly say, with the ladies we deal with at Destiny House, they go back. That's about right. Some of them even more, because there's a trauma bond going on between the trafficker and the one being sold.
Why is there such a strong spirit of manipulation that, like you said, it could be the all-American girl from the all-American neighborhood, she could be a cheerleader or valedictorian, and they could still end up in, I don't want to call it a lifestyle, because in a way maybe there was a choice somewhere there, but then eventually there's not a choice, and now they're trapped. I mean,
okay, so
literally, the spirit of manipulation is so strong here, and
yes.
I mean, it's all Satan. I mean, it's a satanic situation that girls, and there's even guys caught up into the same thing, and that's a subject that most people never even discuss or even think about. But there's a whole nother area there. But I mean, just the thought, because I've interviewed Nancy Alcorn, and she's told me the horror stories. And Nancy, and just hearing,
she's amazing.
It's the manipulation. It's these words. It's the sweet. It may start out as sweet talk, but then, like you said, the black eye's coming.
I know it's literally like, in a way, I think of it like Pinocchio's story in a way, except put a girl in that place. Like, you get brought to this pleasure island. Oh, you're gonna have fun here, but you can never leave. Hotel California.
Yeah, I was about to say, sounds like Hotel California to me.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, So the thing is that when you have a void, and I like to talk about it like this because I love sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
So the galaxies are so beautiful, aren't they? If we look at any picture of a galaxy, I mean, there's a sombrero galaxy, there's a butterfly nebula, there's all these different pictures, but the galaxies I really love because in the middle of every galaxy is so beautiful, the stars and all the planets and the nebulas, right? But in the middle of that galaxy is what? It's got a
Darkness.
black hole.
Yeah,
There's
black hole.
darkness. We don't even know what's in there. The scientists to this day can't explain what's in the middle of our Milky Way. But what I do know is my heart was like that galaxy because there was darkness inside of it. But whatever I put inside there, Dr. Bond, how pretty it looked, it never filled the need that I had deep inside the core of my identity, which is purpose, passion, and the need to be loved. And more specifically, the need to know my purpose and the need to know I was created for a purpose, to be loved. So if I didn't know that, and I think most people that get trafficked, this is the main ingredient that's missing, is that void of love and identity.
Well, then how did you find the love of Jesus in all of this?
Well, Jesus is my honey. I love him. He's just so beautiful. Like, first of all, he was my first husband ever. I'm married now. Some of you all don't know, but Oz Fox from the band Stryper, he's my honey. I've been with him for about 11 years now, almost 12 because 1 year unmarried, we were dating. So that Jesus factor came in because I had a solid foundation, which I'm so thankful for because of going to church as a little girl. And I accepted Jesus into my heart when I was 4 or 5 years old. Didn't really understand it completely, had an epiphany at 8, but then my real epiphany, my real Jesus moment came when I overdosed on August 2nd, 2003 on cocaine, and I literally almost lost my life. And I cried out to Jesus and I said, Jesus, save me from myself, please, like give me another chance. And I made a promise to him. I said, if you're real and if you believe in me, like if you know I'll do what I am asking you to do, I promise I'll do what you say. I will quit selling myself. I will quit drugs and I will get my life together. And I did, Dr. Bond. And you know what? I'm telling you, that ambulance came. I was scared to death. I really was. I thought I was going to die. I had a heart attack. But when that doctor came to me in the hospital, I had this peace come over me that I've never felt before in my life. And, and since then, I have different episodes like that, like the presence of Jesus and the presence of the Holy Spirit and Father God is real. The Trinity is real. And it changed my life. Like it went into that core of that black hole of my heart and it filled it up with the purpose and the love. And no more is that a dark hole. No more.
Well, then which that needs to, everybody watching needs to realize that that's how powerful God is. He's going to, literally, God is chasing you until you finally turn around. God doesn't cause bad things to happen, but he can deliver us, forgive us. Many of you watch today, maybe you have guilt or shame. Well, you know what? Jesus died for that too, and he can wipe all that away. And, Annie Lobert is here telling us the most incredible, darkest story, a way of life that hundreds of thousands, if not a million girls are living right now that need an escape. And let me ask you this, because this is where the rubber hits the road here, Annie. How did you end up starting and founding Hookers for Jesus?
So I love dreams. I dream every night, Dr. Bond. I don't know if you don't. Maybe you all can pray for that. Because
I believe in dreams.
My dreams, our mind is so beautifully designed by God, where even though you're having some of us have had nightmares, that's PTSD and complex trauma usually. And if you're having that, and I would just advise you to pray, get a counselor, trauma counselor, help them walk you through why you're having those nightmares, because your brain's trying to reconcile. It's trying to reconcile what happened to you. So I had a dream one night and I was praying and praying. I was like, Jesus, I just want to see your face. I want to see your face. I want to look in your eyes. I want to meet you. I desired that so deeply. And Dr. Bond, I had the dream. And it's funny because I prayed that prayer quite frequently, and I forgot that I prayed it. And the night that I had that dream, I woke up and didn't remember it right away. But when I was vacuuming the house and then I got in the shower, it hit me. And so the dream was this. I was walking in New York City. Never had been, by the way. I've been there since many times. But big desire to go. And it was at nighttime. And he came up to me in the long robe. It was like he was back in the 2,000 years ago type of culture dress. And he looked at me and held his hands up, and he didn't say anything. He spoke to me with his mind to mind, like mind meld, like Spock. It's just the craziest thing. And told me that I was healed, that I was loved, that he was proud of me, and then he said to me, you need to go tell the ladies on the strip that I love them. Tell the ladies I love them. That's what they're looking for. So that's what started the first outreach. When I realized I had that dream, I'm going to tell you what, that whole dream changed my life. I knew I was called regardless, but when Jesus came to me like that, I mean, that was, wow. I can't explain it. Like, wow, he came to me. That was really him. And you know what? He didn't look like the one on television. There was no, his skin was like an olive color, but it doesn't matter at this point. One of his eyes was blue and the other one was green. Explain that. I don't even know what that means, but he was beautiful. He was so beautiful. Like, he was like an alien to me. I'd never seen anyone like this before. So I'm pretty sure, that everyone, when we see Jesus, it's not going to be who we think he is. We're going to be very surprised what he looks like. And there's been a lot of descriptions of Jesus. And so I bless all those descriptions, because you know what? He can be what he wants to look like. He doesn't have to look like what we think he should look like, right?
And that's right. Well, how many girls have you how many girls have you rescued from the streets, maybe even the porn industry?
Gosh, I don't like to use the word rescue, but helped them get out. And yes, there has been a lot of rescues, but because sometimes people get offended by that word for some reason. I don't know why. It's like, no, I'm not trying to take credit for your life at all. Right. But thousands and thousands of people have been affected by what we do. And as far as Destiny House program, ladies going through our program specifically, so we have 10 beds at our facility that we have. I shouldn't even call it facility. It's a program. It's on a couple acres. I'm actually on the property right now as we speak. I'm in our offices right now. So we, like, thousands of people, I couldn't even count. I'd have to ask my staff looking in our records. But for the Destiny House itself, more than 100, maybe a couple hundred ladies have been through our program already. And it's not a quick program. It's not an in and out. You don't just come in and out. Like, it's a year to 2 years. Wow. So that's why the number isn't as high, because we take our time. It's very customized case planning, trauma informed. We've got equine therapy, trauma therapy. We've got art therapy, life skills classes. The girls work out. They have their own personal trainer. They get their own type of eating plan. I mean, it's a total holistic wellness program for them. I designed it like that in the beginning, before any program I've ever heard of, any sex trafficking program. We were the first of its kind at the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, do a lot of people, people who maybe meet you for the first time, or they don't know you, and then they hear the name Hookers for Jesus. What are the type of comments do you get about that?
Well, some get offended. Oh, well. Because it doesn't mean what you think. We're not former prostitutes loving on Jesus, but we are. In a way, we are. Or trafficking victims. But Hooker is actually based, and I did not know this at the time, but it's based on the scriptures. Of course, this was the first initial one. Matthew 4:19, I will teach you how to fish for people. God gave me the name, Dr. Bond. He literally gave me that name before I found that scripture. I was like, wow. Okay, you know what you're doing, Lord. I will teach you how to be fishers of people that are drowning, and I'm going to add my own thing to it, in the terrible hurricane, stormy waters of sex trafficking. We pull them out. Now, listen to this part. This is the part that's really fun. There is a boat called the Galway Hooker, okay, from Holland. It's just like the type of boat that Jesus and the disciples went fishing in Galilee, right?
Wow.
So we literally are hookers for Jesus. We are a boat of help, services, yes, a little bit of rescue, and a place to have someone lay their head and become stabilized and become whole and healed from being trafficked. So
Wow.
we serve, our main population is women, but we do serve men that come to us for resources and help, and the trans community, the LGBT community. We've had all kinds of people in our program. In Destiny House itself, we've had LGBTQ, of course, as well. But we really focus on that inner core of the healing of the heart more than anything.
Well,
And then everything else falls behind that.
you're doing an amazing work. And before we go, what type of advice would you give today's parents that maybe they have preteens, they have teenagers, regardless if they're male or female? What kind of advice would you give them today?
Since the core of the reason why I did what I did with my life started with a void in my heart of love of my father, that was the main ticket. No love from my father. So I would tell the parents, what is your relationship like with your children? Make sure it's good. Make sure your relationship is well communicated. And if it's not, you need to fix it. If you need help with that, get some counselors involved, psychologists involved, whatever you need to help repair the breach that's happened. Maybe you're a single parent. I get it. Maybe you're a parent that the other one's an addict or the other parent is abusive. You got to figure that out. But what I do know that you need to do more than anything is make sure your child is well taken care of. They're stable. They feel loved. There's no wanting or needing in their life. They have enough clothing, food, and their mental health is okay.
Yes.
That's really important.
Very much so. Ladies and gentlemen, wow. Annie, it has been an education. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and you are doing such a great work. I want to thank you again for being on my show, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I'm excited to come back. I have more to talk about.
I know you do. And ladies and gentlemen, stick with me because we will be right back after this message.